Samuel here at Over the Edge, sponsored by The Edge Ministry. In an ever-changing church environment, the youth leader's role is to build a sense of community within the youth of church, providing spiritual and social development.
Yes, Christina. Tonight we have a very special guest, Victoria Doran, who is the youth ministry leader at Mark Baptist Church. Welcome, Victoria.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Thank you. Welcome today. How are you today?
I'm good. It's been a busy day today for me, but It's been good.
That's good. So, jumping into the deep end, when you took the position of youth ministry leader, did you find any challenge to balance your home life with your new position?
Yeah. So when the position first became available, it was only a part-time interim position. So they were only looking for someone about 18 hours a week. At the time, I was actually currently on maternity leave with just having my twins. So the position was scheduled to start in August 2018. So my twins were still about only 8 months old. So I had my 3 kids at home and was just looking for something kind of different. I'm one of those people who feel like God doesn't really do anything unintentional. I actually heard this really cool understanding of a way to make sense of it all. And it's like, are you someone who, when you eat a bag of Skittles, do you just kind of pour them in your hand and shove them in your mouth? Or do you specifically pick out the ones that you want to eat?
I think I'm the former.
Oh, see, I save the red ones for last.
Okay.
So I specifically pick them out.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like God. Like God doesn't just throw them in his hand and shoves them back. He really takes his time and picks them out one by one. So I really felt like God just kind of opened up this position for me, as it was something that was really going to not only benefit my church family, but my home family as well. It was a little difficult trying to really understand what it was going to look like, what my schedule was going to look like. How was I going to balance caring for 3 kids at home and caring for kids at the church, and being able to put my full effort forward. I'm also one person who really tries to go above and beyond a position. I'm not one who is satisfied with satisfactory. I like to go the step above. So really putting 110% into it, and then 110% into my family as well, was definitely one of the biggest challenges that I believe I faced in the first few months of the new position.
I think every Sunday when you come up to have the announcement for the youth group, there's so many events. Like, wow.
Yeah. So we meet every Friday.
Right.
So I do my best to kind of have one outing event each month. So that's kind of like, for example, in March, this Friday, we're going to the escape room. So it's just a fun outside activity. Kids invite their friends, and it's just a fun way to kind of relax and just kind of chill.
Right.
Whereas then we spend 3 other events here at the church. So I try not to repeat things. So sometimes it's a lot of planning. So like, for example, I'm planning Victoria's Game of Games off of spin-off of Ellen, which was requested by one of the kids, which takes a lot of planning. Like I thought, it'll be super easy. No.
Right.
So, just kind of spending that time and energy, putting effort into the kids' events, kind of just showing the kids that, hey, like I'm putting in all this effort so that you guys are fully enjoying yourself. It's not just, hey, let's come sit around, throw the basketball around the gym a couple times and call it a night.
Right. And I don't know that much about your history. You grew up in the church, is that right?
Yeah. So, my family and I attended Blythewood Baptist, which is in Scarborough, when I was born. So until about 10, I lived in Scarborough. And then my parents felt called to move. So we sold our house in Scarborough and moved to, actually it was funny, my parents wanted to live in Markham. So my parents felt God calling them to Markham Baptist. So my parents really spent time and effort looking for houses here in the Markham area, and it just wasn't working out. So one day the real estate agent called my dad and said, I found this really great house in Pickering. I think you should go and look at it. And my dad was like, I am not living in Pickering. We are not moving to Pickering. So my dad, during his work day, drove up to the house in Pickering because he wanted to find something wrong with it to tell my mom, look, we're not going. This is what's wrong. My dad pulled up to the front door and said, this is the house we're moving into. So my parents bought the house in Pickering, which is only about a 20-minute drive from Markham, but my parents really felt called to this church. So I started attending here when I was 10.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then in about when I was in college, so I would say it was probably about 2009, my parents decided that it was time for them to move on. But at the time I was dating my now husband. And so he and his father attend this church. So I felt like this was the place that I was supposed to stay. And to be honest, I've really, really felt like this is like my second family.
Right.
Like it's not just people that I see on a Sunday morning. It's people that I know love and care for me deeply. And I think that's something that's really important for people to be able to find, is that not just especially if people are shopping around for a church, they're not just looking for a place to worship, but you're looking for a place that you can call home. Because the things, especially some of the things that I've gone through in my life that have been like so crazy and so hectic, having that village behind me has been an extreme asset.
Right. Because I think sometimes I see the three kids, they're just running, and everybody has their head. Well, I see sometimes some different people picking up the babies. There is that village. Like,
oh yeah. So and the thing is when I walk through the door at the church, it doesn't bother me that my kids take off, because I know that there's always somebody who's like, really cool thing. When I was pregnant with Jackson, Pat and I one Sunday were talking about who we were thinking of being godparents. And some of the youth overheard and were like, can we be the godparents? We'll be the fairy godmothers. So at my shower that the church hosted, all of the girls showed up in little fairy wings that were different colors, like the fairy godmothers from Sleeping Beauty. So, it's so incredible to have that sense of I don't feel like I'm coming in and my kids are interrupting anybody. It's just everybody seems enthused and enjoying watching them run around and grow up. And that's another thing, is just having those people that can say, oh, I remember watching you when you were this small. I mean, even people in this church say the same thing to me. I remember the first time I preached on a Sunday morning, Colin Prodger came up to me and was like, I can't believe you are the same little girl who used to run around these pews. So it's really interesting to kind of be a part of a community that is so involved in your life, not just a building. Right.
And so what, at this point of your life, what brought you to immediately saying, this is the time for me to kind of take on that position as a youth ministry leader?
I don't necessarily think it was me making that decision. When I was a kid in elementary school, I always wanted to be a teacher. That's what I wanted to do, teaching. I love kids. I love being around kids. It was funny. My brother and sister always said, I was born to be a mom because I love kids. So when I got to high school, I was like, I'm going to go and be a kindergarten teacher. And then I actually have a slight learning disability. So going through school, I had an IEP, which is an individual education plan. So my reading and writing levels or spelling levels were slightly behind the grade I was actually in. So I struggled a lot in high school, just trying to catch up on everything and all that kind of stuff. So dealing with that was a little difficult. So I always thought like, oh, I wasn't smart enough to go to university. Like university isn't where I'm meant to go because like I'm not smart enough. And that was just like my internal feelings. So I always like, well, to be a teacher, I have to go to university. So I guess I should find somewhere else that I fit. And to be honest, being a youth ministry leader or a pastor never crossed my mind. Like, friends of mine say, like, if you had told me 6 months ago that, or when we were in high school, that you were going to be a youth ministry leader, I would have laughed.
Right.
And I was like, it's not one of those positions that like pop into your head. When you're at school, you're like teacher, doctor, lawyer, like youth pastor doesn't really come into the mix. So, the opportunity that I've been blessed with is so incredible. Being able to not only nurture these kids in the fact that they're growing up and that kind of thing, but just even diving deeper into their spiritual life. It's so encouraging to me to have these kids trust me on such a deep level. Like, taking care of a kid is one thing, but taking care of their spiritual well-being is just so much deeper.
Right.
Because not only are we talking about their life here on earth, but we're talking about their afterlife.
Right.
And so it's something that's so empowering to me to be able to just be a small part of that. One thing you kind of look at it is people come and go into your life, and you never really fully know the impact that one person's going to have on your life. It could be just this small little tidbit that is a necessary thing that you're not going to see growth for 20 years. Right? It sometimes takes that one little step to get to where you need to go. So to be that one little step for these kids is just amazing.
Right. Because I know, especially even that period, the youth period, is extremely important in your own growth with God. And I just you mentioning that, I think back to the time when I was in youth, like a part of the youth group, so-called, and I always felt so separated from, I don't know why I felt so separated, and I would just always attend adult, like the adult congregation with my parents. I think back, and when I see sometimes in Markham groups, like the church and how all the youth, they gather together, they have movie nights and all this, I kind of think about what I kind of missed, like in that very, very, that precious age of youth. And I must think in the Christian development, that's a very, very important and sacred time.
Yeah, it's not just an important time in your spiritual life, but in your like life as well. Is like in that age of like 11 to 16, you're really picking on lifetime habits, right? So you're picking up things that you are going to continue growing and doing as you mature. And the same goes with your spiritual life. For kids who aren't really used to praying on a regular basis, it's like teaching an old dog new tricks, right? The older you get, the harder it is to implement those good, solid spiritual habits. So even getting to them at such a vulnerable age of saying, okay, here's things that are going to help you move further in your Christian faith.
So let's say the activities you have, how do you make them, I would guess, how do you prepare them to be more Christ-focused as opposed to something that is more, let's say, oh, Friday it's youth, something more extracurricular?
Yeah, like a typical Friday night would be kids arrive, we kind of do an activity, and then we spend about 35 to like 45 minutes in deep conversation. So I try not to start, okay, so we're going to open our Bible and we're going to read John chapter 3, where what we kind of do is we spend time talking about real life topics that these kids are going through and how we can relate the Bible to our current situation. So one of the things is, one of the kids came to me and was like, I'm having a lot of struggle making friends. So we talked about friendship and talked about relationships and how to build those authentic, quality relationships. Not like romantic relationships, but just human connection. How do we connect with other people? And then we talked about like Jesus selecting his disciples and how he chose his close friends. We also talked about the relationships that Jesus made with people, is that Jesus didn't just make relationships with people that seemed easy or that were considered back then the appropriate relationship. He made friends with the outcasts, with the lame, with the sick, with the hungry, with those people who were seen as pushed away, pushed aside. So we really dove deeper into, sometimes when we look at other people, we automatically judge them. But how do we take that step back and say, instead of judging this person for their outside appearance, how can we look at them from the inside out, and say, you know what, this person may be the friend I was needing, or the friend that I was looking for, or you're the friend that this person needed. So we kind of try to use real life experience and how we as a youth group can kind of dive into those uncomfortable conversations, right, but using the Bible as our textbook. Right. So like in school, you have a math textbook, history textbook.
So it's always in context.
Yeah.
Right.
So the Bible is our research. Our Bible is where we gather that information, but it's not necessarily book by book, scripture by scripture.
Right. And I just want to talk about, let's say, the topic of social media. And like, I'm sure even that period, it's a very touchy topic with like how a lot of youth, especially in high schools, how they use social media and how it can be, when you grow up with this type of technology, it can be very hindering sometimes, even to when you were talking about relationships, those type of human connections.
Yeah. So I'm kind of new to the social media game. It was funny. We were just, the youth group and I were just at an event called Blizzard, which is a winter retreat hosted by CBOQ. Well, if you want to be a leader next year, just let me know. It's amazing. So I recommend anyone who wants to attend, get your church to attend CBOQ, Blizzard, or Avalanche. It is amazing. So the speaker came out and said, so what is your form of social media that you use most often? And I said, Facebook. And the kids behind me said, that's because you're old.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, what do you mean that's because I'm old? And they were like, oh, only old people use Facebook nowadays. So I was like, okay, so I'm obviously way behind on the social media time. But I definitely do agree with you that like social media can really put a hindrance on human connection. So one thing at youth group on Friday nights is the kids turn in their phone for 3 hours. So they arrive at 7 and their phones go into my love box that gets locked in my office. And so then they spend 3 hours from 7 till 10 without their cell phone. So the only person who has their phone on during that time is me, just for emergency purposes. But yeah, it's 3 solid hours where I have these kids' undivided attention. Right. These kids are focusing on their relationships that they're building with the people that they attend church with. Right. So I really find that just shutting down for those 3 hours a week is like so incredible, because these kids talk more, they open up more, they figure out things that they wouldn't really figure out on a regular basis with their heads in their phones. And I really find that social media can be that roadblock for people to connect. Because a lot of people find, or at least I find, that people on social media, they put up this filter. If you look, all of the social medias, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, even Facebook now has all these filters that you can add to your photos to make yourself have freckles or blonde hair or wearing sunglasses. And it's like, but that's not you. That's not your authentic you. And actually, this was the topic that was at Blizzard past weekend. It was literally talking about how do we tear down those filters and just be ourselves, tear down those things that we're putting up as a way to show our supposed best selves, but actually showing our real self. And that's one thing that I'm really starting to, since the Blizzard meet, just trying to find a way to really drive that point home to these kids that at least in the four walls of this building, during those 3 hours that they're with me on Friday night, or those 2 hours they're with me on Sunday morning, that they don't have to have that filter on, that they don't have to be this put together, like, cool self. They can just be them.
How fast did you actually build that trust with them? Like, just to administer that, okay, for 3 hours? Like, I imagine there must have been some type of hesitance.
For some, yes.
Yeah.
For a lot of these kids, like I said, I've known them since some of them started attending Markham. So I felt like being in this position, I was blessed to have built that relationship with these kids prior to being their youth leader. That I wasn't just coming in off the street and saying, trust me, rely on me, because putting your spiritual development in someone's hands is it's such a intimate relationship. So to gain that trust with the kids prior to, I think I had a heads up going into it. I also find that I am very open with who I am and what my life is about. Being open and honest and not having any filters myself, I think really shows these kids that, hey, I'm willing to be vulnerable with you if you're willing to be vulnerable with me. And there's also that level of trust. You have to really build that trust, taking it one step at a time, not pushing these kids to, hey, tell me what's wrong. It's allowing them the comfort of knowing when there is something wrong, you can come to me and talk to me, and the conversations that we have stay between us. It's like doctor-patient confidentiality. Like, I'm not here to go about, oh, so did you hear what this person said? Or did you hear what this person happened at school the other day? It's, no, this is relationships that they have built one-on-one with me that have really taken time. I'm going in... This year will be my going into September will be my third season with these kids. And it does take, for some, like, I don't feel like I have that full confidence in our relationship being that it's that raw. Some kids, I have that raw connection right from the start. Right. Others, they just take time. And I think it is more just of a trust thing, is in this day and age, it's really hard to find somebody you can fully put your 100% trust into.
Right. And could you actually take us behind what are some of the hardships with this? Like us with this role of a youth minister? And talk about how your family has been a great support system. Yeah.
So I'd say one of the hardships is not taking on all of their pain. So one of the things that I've learned about myself is that God has blessed me with the spiritual gift of mercy. I love to help people. I love to be involved. I loved to find ways to give others before myself. I am the typical put myself on the back burner, everybody takes precedent over me. And at one point in my time just having the twins, I was in 4 days, I think I had 14 hours of sleep, just because I was taking care of them and my husband and my older son, and myself was just put on the back. So really just trying to find that dividing line between being able to help them and not taking on their pain and their struggle as my own. Finding a way to show empathy without saying, okay, now I feel your pain, right, and I'm now taking it as my own. My family, when people say it takes a village to raise children, that is not a euphemism. That is not a metaphor. That is an actual fact. I could not be raising my 3 children without my village. I have an incredible husband who is very supportive of the things that I do, is very supportive of the time that I'm away from my kids to even develop my own personal spiritual growth. I have a father-in-law who is incredible. He's in his 60s and takes care of my 3 children under 4 by himself. Like, you think, like, I think it's hard and I'm in my 30s. He's in his 60s and does it by himself. So, like, I'm just so thankful for him. I have 2 loving parents who are always willing to help. I have siblings who are willing to help. And then on top of that, I have my church family who are always willing to help. I have people come up to me, if you ever need anything, call me. If you need this, call me. So having that village allows me to be able to use my spiritual gift of being able to help others because I have so many people around me helping me. And I think that was another thing that I really struggled with at the beginning was accepting the help. I looked at it as, where babies come from. I chose to have babies. Like, I chose to do the action to procreate. So that was my choice.
Right.
So it was my responsibility to take care of my children. It was my responsibility as a wife to take care of my husband. It was my responsibility as a homeowner to take care of my home. So when people were like, oh, Victoria, how can I help you? Or my mom would show up and say, you go lie down and I'll do the laundry. And I'm like, no, like, I'll sit here and fold laundry with you. But the purpose of my mom coming over was to care for me and allow me to sleep so that if the kids cried, my mom would take care of them. But they cried, I woke up and I got up and my mom's like, no, go back to sleep. And I'm like, no, they're my kids, I got them. Right. So I really struggled with accepting the help because in my head, it was my responsibility. So really opening up and being vulnerable to accept that help, I think is where I started to find like my full potential and be able to strive and take those steps further to be able to, again, use my spiritual gift to be able to help others because I had so many people that God had put into my life helping me.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a pattern I see a lot with people that are, they get categorized as the giver when they do this personality test. Is they are extremely helpful to other people, but when they themselves look at themselves and it's like, I enjoy helping other people. And then the question is always, yes, I know, but help yourself first. And then there's always that statement, help yourself before you can help others.
Yeah, right? Like on airplane, when the oxygen masks come, they say always put your own on first before you help others. And that is definitely one thing I struggle with. I struggle with being able to put my own oxygen mask on. And I think that's one thing that a lot of moms struggle with is they look at it as, hey, I'm a mom first. I have people who are literally rely on me for everything. Like my kids, like I have to pick them up and put them in their high chair. I have to change their diaper. I get them dressed. I feed them.
Side note, moms are the best. I love you, Mom.
So like I am physically responsible for these 3 children. Without me, they'd be doing nothing or running amok. So like I feel like I struggle a lot, and I know a lot of moms do, to be able to put on your own oxygen mask before anyone else. So I find, and the thing that having that village behind me allows me sometimes to step back and say, okay, I need a second. I need a me time. And the same goes with my husband. Like my husband is he owns his own business. So he's very busy. He's a one-man show. So he does it all. So sometimes it's like, okay, I have to take on more responsibility because he's out there working, trying to care for our family. And so I look at it as, how can I care for him? But then he comes home and he's like, okay, you've now done this. Why don't you sit down? I'll grab you a drink. I'll grab you a cup of tea. Or, on my way home, I'll stop and grab dinner so you don't have to cook tonight. Just those little things is just such a big impact. So really being able to say, taking that step back and taking that time, and the ability to say no. is another thing that I think a lot of people, especially who are labeled the giver or someone who has mercy, is very struggles with saying no. They're constantly feeling like, oh yes, I'll do that, or I'll do that. And that's another thing that I've really learned being in this position as a youth ministry leader, is taking that time to say, you know what, I have a lot on my plate right now. I want to do all of this well. I'm going to have to say no. And being okay with the fact that you're not disappointing anybody. Right. You're not it's not the right time. And the only person you're going to disappoint is if you take that on and you're not able to do it to your full potential. And that's something that I do struggle with, is I take too much on, and then I feel like I have to do everything so well and so perfectly that if I don't, the only person I'm mad at is myself. Right. So saying, instead of taking on that one thing, I could have done all of this so much better. Mm-hmm. And that's really something that these kids have also taught me as well, is just being able to be me is enough.
Right. Let's say we're in an airplane together and I ask you, what do you do for a living? What would be your answer?
Oh, so actually, it's really funny. Pat and I, my husband, went on a vacation, and we were sitting in the lounge chairs on the beach, and we met this loving couple who was there on their honeymoon, and we were like, oh, what do you do? And they told us, I think he was a firefighter and she did something else. And then they're like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm just a mom and a youth ministry leader. And they looked at me and they were like, I've now learned to drop I'm just a, because I'm not just a mom. I am a mom. I am a wife, not just a. Because so if I was sitting next to you and you were a stranger on a plane, and they asked me, what do I do for a living? I would say I am a youth pastor. And the reason I use pastor is actually it was Paul Lamb came and spoke to us on a Sunday. And he stood up at the front of the congregation and told the congregation how blessed they were to have Pastor Craig and Pastor Victoria. And so I went up to him after the service and I said, I'm actually not a pastor. Right. I'm a youth ministry leader. And he said, no, you are a pastor. Because if you look at the spiritual gifts that God has blessed people with, pastor is one of the spiritual gifts. And it doesn't actually mean, oh, you are a reverend. When you have those R-E-V in front of your name, it means you got a Master of Divinity and have been ordained. So me being a pastor, it just means that I am responsible for the spiritual growth of my community, and my community is youth. Right. So I am a youth pastor. Right.
And when you're talking about community, I don't know if it's just me, but the first time when I came to Markham Baptist Church, and now I don't know if it's just me, but I've seen the youth group almost grow. I don't know how many has grown in number, or how many members do you have right now?
So when I started in 2018, I had 5.
Wow.
Now in 2020, I have 18.
That's amazing.
So we have grown, but I don't just necessarily think we've grown in numbers, but we've grown in visibility. I am very passionate about having the youth as part of our church community. The church a while back changed our slogan or vision to "We are a multi-generational church." And the first time we did that, I'm not going to lie, I laughed. I was like, we are not a multi-generational church. Like, where do you see the young people? I'm part of the nominating committee here at the church, and I am all about let's get youth on our community, on our committees, because to be honest, these are the people that are going to continue to grow up, right? I was someone who, I grew up in this church, and look, I've taken step by step by step to grow in this church, and that's what our youth are here to do. So giving them the opportunity to be seen in our church family and grow. I love being able to say that I implemented the youth-led service, having every aspect of this of a Sunday service be run or participated by a youth person. That we have a youth member on our CE and O board. We have a youth representative on our management team. Having those youth representation and really just saying, we are the future of Markham. You know, we're here and we want to grow in this family and we want to grow this community and we want to grow this congregation. You need to start from the bottom.
Right.
So, so it's just really exciting to me to see the growth of our youth group, again, not just in number, but in awareness and in visibility in our church congregation. So when I look at the back of our bulletin and it says we are a multi-generational church, I look around and I say, youth on piano, youth leading, youth reading scripture, youth doing offering. We are a multi-generational church, and it's so exciting to see how encouraging a lot of the lifetimers here at Markham have accepted that we are a growing church and we need to involve and encourage our youth to be part of a church community. Because I also feel that that's what's going to encourage them to find a church when they go off to university or they move away. One of my kids in my youth group is actually looking to go off to university at the University of Ottawa next year. And to be able to turn around and say, okay, it's important for you to find a church family out there. That's where you're going to be worshiping on a regular basis. You're not going to come home every weekend, the 5-hour drive just for church on Sunday morning. So you need to find, but they hunger for that when they've had such an impactful community at home.
Right.
Like, you'll miss it. The first Sunday you skip church when you're off at university, you're like, I don't feel like my life, I feel like something's missing today. Oh, wait, it's Sunday. I usually go to church on Sunday. You don't when you have that foundation of that impact, it makes an impact down the road.
Can you actually talk about, you mentioned it, the youth, the service that the youth took over, and I know you had a skit. Could you actually mention something brief about that period, the skit?
Which skit?
I think it was the one where everybody was wearing masks.
So I sat down with my youth partner, Hannah, and I said, instead of just telling the typical Jesus birth story, how can we make this fun? And my son loves superheroes. Like, I don't just mean love, I mean loves superheroes. He has this thing that when my husband and I get angry at him or get upset, he says we turn Hulk. Like, he says, like if he does something, like he hits his brother and we're like, Jackson, he's like, don't turn Hulk. Right? Because like that's what Bruce Banner does when he gets angry. He turns Hulk. Right. He loves superheroes. So I had this superhero thing in the back of my head, and I was like, so I went online and I was searching for stuff, and I found this small little like 2-minute script about superheroes who were afraid that a new superhero was coming to the world to take their jobs. And that was Jesus. Jesus is coming to save the world from sin. Superheroes save the world from villains. So I was like, that is awesome. So Hannah and I sat together and we just pounded out this script, and we were able to involve the same characters that we've all grown up hearing about in the Christmas story in a fun, new, adventurous way. And I just loved being able to see the kids get so involved, being like, I got to be Hulk, or I got to be Black Panther, or I got to be Wonder Woman. And it's like, yeah, in a church service. See, church can be fun. And my son, Jackson, who's like in love with the superheroes, he paid attention to every moment of that play. Right. He even asks, like, he's like, oh, can we do it again? Can we watch it again? And I'm like, I don't know if it's recorded, but I'll try. Like, it was a fun way to get the Christmas story across in a different way. So every time you hear something different, or you hear a scripture read a different way, it has a slight different impact than the first time you heard it. So looking at the Christmas story as something whereas Jesus didn't just come to the earth as a baby. He came to save us from sin. He was our superhero, sin being our villain, and he came not only just as a baby to live among us and say, like, I am here. It's, no, I'm here to save you.
Right. And can you, it was a great skit.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about your two twins and the challenges you had when you gave birth to them? What are the challenges you had, and how did that part of that motherhood, how did your faith grow?
Okay. So I was at work one day. So I used to work at Longo's as a Starbucks barista. And I'm at work one day and I was like, I'm really not feeling well. I was like, I'm going to take a pregnancy test just for the fun of it. Like, just possibly, right? So I go, I do my thing. 2 minutes later and the positive is there. And I'm like, okay. So I go to my doctor. My doctor sends me for blood work and he comes back and he's like, so based on your HCG levels, which are the levels that tell you're pregnant, you're about 6 weeks along. And I was like, that's not possible. I was like, I did the math. No, that wasn't happening 6 weeks ago. Like, no, not possible. And he's like, well, we're going to send you for an ultrasound to have you dated. So they look at the sizing of the uterus and everything and the fetus to see, kind of estimate the age. Mm-hmm. So I said to Pat, I'm going to go for this appointment. He went off to work. My mom was looking after Jackson and I went into the ultrasound. I'd been in ultrasounds before, wasn't expecting anything different. So I'm laying on the table and the nurse is like, okay, I'm going to check the right side of your uterus. So she checks. She's like, yep, everything looks good. There's the sac. We can see the heart. Everything looks good. Now I'm going to do the left side. And I was like, okay, awesome. So she's on the left side. And for anyone who hasn't been in a pregnancy ultrasound, you can't see the monitor. So it's literally you're laying on a table with the monitor. You can see the back of it, but you don't see the screen. So all I can see is this little wand on my belly. So she's looking around on the left side and she says, oh, I can see this one so much clearer. And I was like, wait, this one? And she was like, turn the screen, and there were two in an ultrasound, there's like these two little black holes. Yeah. So usually there's only one. I had two black holes with two little dots in the corner. And she's like, I've been doing this for 35 years, so I think it's safe to say you're having twins. And I told her to shut up. I was like, no. And I'm like, that's not possible. And she's like, well, I'm sorry, there's two. So I got her to print off the ultrasound, and I had her print them off in pictures A and B. So I went to go meet my mom, and I showed my mom the picture of twin A, and she's like, oh, okay. It's an ultrasound. I showed her the picture of twin B and she's like, oh, this is an ultrasound. And I showed her the picture of twin A and B together and she was like, you're kidding me, Victoria. What are you going to do? Right. And I was like, I don't know. I was going from having one child to having three. My husband and I live in a 2-bedroom condo. So there's now 5 of us living in a 2-bedroom condo. Needless to say, I freaked out a little. So somebody, I can't remember who it was. I think it was my father said, you need to go home and read 1 Corinthians 10:13. And I actually wrote it down because it's one of my favorite verses. So from the NIV version, it says, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. So I look at it as God doesn't give you anything you can't handle. And so I felt like God had blessed me with this opportunity to bring 2 children into this world for his glory. And that everybody said that if God was going to bless somebody with twins, I'm not surprised it's you. Because I am one who has always loved kids. It was very, very difficult. People say to me all the time, oh, I always wanted twins. And I constantly say, no, you don't. You think you do. The grass is always greener on the other side, right? So my twins are fraternal. They're boy-girl. So fraternal twins are like having two separate babies at one time. Identical twins are the same person split in two. So they generally eat the same, sleep the same, poop the same. My twins did not. So one was sleeping while the other was pooping. One was pooping while the other was eating. One was eating while the other was sleeping. So it was very hard for us to get on a schedule. And they were so different that it was very difficult. And then you have to also add in the fact that Jackson was only a year and a half when the twins were born. They're only 23 months apart. So it was like Jackson was still relying on me for a lot of things. Right. So to add in the fact that I now have two young babies who were born 6 weeks early, and I'm going to pause the story and backtrack a little. So my due date was originally scheduled for January 1st. My doctor told me he wouldn't allow me to go past December 13th. Okay. Twins generally don't go past 38 weeks because 38 weeks is the length of time for twins. Whereas for one, it's usually 40. So I knew that my C-section was scheduled for December 13th. Jackson has respiratory issues, and he was actually in the hospital 3 days prior to me giving birth with pneumonia. Oh my. So the Wednesday before I gave birth, so this was back in November of 2017, we were admitted to the hospital with Jackson having pneumonia. So he was in the hospital. The Thursday he was there, I went for my regular doctor's appointments with the twins, and my doctor says to me, Victoria, I don't think you're going to make it till the 13th. I think we need to move up the appointment. So you're now going to have your scheduled C-section on December 7th. So I lost 6 days. So I said, okay. So I go back to the hospital room where Jackson is with my husband, and I say, so we just lost 6 days. At this point, I did not have my stroller put together. I did not have the cribs put together. I did not even have my hospital bag packed. I was not prepared for these twins in the slightest. So we were released from the hospital on the Friday afternoon with Jackson. We came home, and literally Pat and I went into power mode and tried to do everything, moving furniture, doing laundry, putting together the beds, putting away the baby clothes, packing the hospital bag, getting the car seats installed in the van, getting the stroller all put together, and all of this stuff. And it took us Friday night, all day Saturday. Sunday morning, Pat brought Jackson to church, and I stayed at home with my mom and dad, who came to help me do more to get ready for these twins. Pat came home. Jackson went down for his nap after church. My parents went home, and I said, Pat, I called Toys R Us. You need to go and pick up these things. They're waiting for you. I laid down on my couch. Within 10 minutes, my water broke.
Oh my God.
When they show a water breaking in the movies, that's not what happens. Oh. It is not this little wash, like, oh, look, there's a small little puddle on the floor. No. It was Niagara Falls. Okay? Niagara Falls. So I get on the phone. I call my dad. I say, you need to come back and look after Jackson because Pat has to take me to the hospital. My water's broke. So I was so busy getting ready for the twins that I forced them to come even earlier. Oh my. So I was taken to Markham Stouffville Hospital and put in for an emergency C-section. So they were born on December 3rd. So not only were they born already, they were born 6 weeks early, they were born earlier than I had originally scheduled. Mm-hmm. So bringing them home, it was a very big change. Mm-hmm. It was very testing on not only my strength as a human, but my strength as a mom, my strength as a wife, strength as a homeowner, being able to be like, who's going to do the laundry, who's going to do the cooking, and all of these things. But I just have to say again, just having that village behind me was so God-saving, that it really allowed me to dive deeper into my relationship with God and how important it is to have him in your life.
Right.
When my grandfather was alive, he told me the Footprints poem. Have you ever heard the Footprints poem? Oh my goodness, it is an amazing poem. So it's basically, the gist of it is, a man is walking on a beach and he looks up into the sky and he sees different scenes from his life. So he sees when he got married, when he had kids, he sees all the great things, but then he sees all the bad things that happened as well, the things that were like the lowest of the low. And so he looks back at the beach and he sees, during the good times in his life, 2 sets of footprints in the sand. And during the worst times in his life, he only sees 1. So he looks up to the sky and he says, Lord, you told me that if I followed you, you would never leave me, that you would always be with me. Why, during the worst times in my life, the times that I needed you the most, would you leave me? And God says to him, my child, it was then that I carried you. So when the man looked back at the beach, he thought he saw his footprints, but they were Jesus's footprints carrying him through those hard times. And so when I had the twins, that poem was constantly going through my mind. Right. Constantly under the understanding that I'm not doing this alone, that God is physically carrying me through this situation, that no matter what, I have him beside me. During those hard times, it can either pull you closer to God, or some people push further away. And I urge anybody who's going through a hard time, do not push away. Push closer. Hold on tighter. Pull him in as tight as you possibly can, because he is the only way, and that says it in 1 Corinthians, is he is the only way you're going to be able to endure that hardship. And, you know, I feel like that is 100% true in my own life, is that having twins, such a blessing. Right. Hard as heck, but it is such a blessing. To be able to have God in the middle of that situation and hold on to him, I believe is the only true reason I survived. Because God provided me with the people to help me, with the people to encourage me, to the people to just even say, like, I'm praying for you. I had people in the church who said, how can I help you? Right. I had people bringing me meals and saying, don't worry about cooking, here, handing me food. I was concerned financially in how are we going to do this? Like, we went from having 1, thinking we were having 2, and now going to 3 children. Like, how do we put 3 diapers are expensive. How do I put diapers on 3 kids? How do I clothe 3 kids? How do I feed 3 kids? And just having that sense of knowing that there are so many people out there looking after me. There's a part in scripture that, like, Jesus said, Jesus took clothes off his back to give to the naked. He gave food to them. And I feel like that was God. God put these people in front of me to say, here, take my coat. Here, let me feed you. Here, let me do this. It was, for everyone doing that to me, that was God doing it through them.
And I can only imagine what your schedule is like right now. Like, how do you prioritize time to keep yourself spiritually fed to lead this youth ministry group? Like, how do you?
So I find I take time in the small moments. I am blessed that my children are now in full-time daycare, which is a real blessing because I can really spend that time and energy focusing on the youth group and my home life and myself. I like to start the day and end the day with God. It's something that I learned in one of the conferences that I attended last year, is it's a way for me to wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to commit this day to God. And then at the end of the day, just thanking him for being with me. So I usually, I wake up in the morning and my husband bought me this little calendar that has scripture on it. Okay. And it's literally like a 2-second thing where I go into my kitchen and I just I rip it off and I read through it. And it always seems, again, so intentional that scripture is the one I needed to read that day. And then...
From what brand? From what?
He bought it from the Calendar Club. I could send you the information of where it's from. But it was this small little one, magnet, sticks on my fridge. Okay. It's awesome. And then I started spending the time brushing my teeth, praying. So when I was little, my parents used to get me to brush my teeth for the certain amount of time, not just, okay, I'm done. I used to sing a song. Mm-hmm. So my mom taught me the You Are My Sunshine song while I brushed my teeth. So instead of singing You Are My Sunshine while I brush my teeth, I pray. Now, some people would say, oh, well, in prayer, you need to be 100% still and eyes closed and hands folded and really just focusing on what you're saying. But the thing is God already knows what I'm going to say. God already knows how I'm feeling and what I want to say to him. But it's physically spending that time with him and saying, okay, yes, I'm brushing my teeth, but I'm also committing to the fact that, hey, God, you know my life is busy. You know I rarely have time for myself. Right. But hey, I'm going to spend these 5 or 10 minutes talking to you. And then I also spend time in my car. So I've started listening to books on tape, or I know tape sounds really authentic, but and I also listen to podcasts and that kind of thing. I don't really necessarily have a favorite. It's more just whatever I pop on. I've actually been really diving into Sirius XM Radio's The Message and just listening to different music. I'm really loving, there's a song that's You Am Who I Say I Am. And it's by Hillsong. And then Lauren Dingle sings Who Am I? Those are 2 songs. Or there's a song called Good Father. And these songs just seem to I get in the car and I turn it on and it's just, that song's just playing. And I'm just oh God, hi, how are ya? When my kids are in my car, I'm listening to ABCs and 1, 2, 3s and Leapfrog. So when I get in the car and it's just Jesus just pouring out at me, being I am who you say I am. It's okay, hey God, how's it going? Just spending that 20 minutes in the car, just really, instead of just talking on the phone or just listening to random stuff, just really committing that time really helps me grow in that spiritual connection with him. Spending time in those small moments. Right. Because not everybody has half an hour to sit down and say, I'm committing this time to opening my Bible and diving into devotion. But spending any time with him, that's all God wants from us, is for us to spend time with him. And that's one of the things when I talked about the relationships conversation I had with the kids is, how do you grow a relationship? By spending time with people. Some days there were chances I spent 10 minutes with my husband, but those 10 minutes meant more to me than spending hours with him, because it was 10 minutes. We only had those limited 10 minutes. So let's make the most of those 10 minutes. And that's all God wants from us.
Right. Let's say a hypothetical situation, or maybe this might have happened. If somebody in the church is critical of your approaches in the youth ministry group, how would you deal with that situation?
Apologize later. I'm not going to lie. I stopped asking for permission.
Right.
And just apologize later. I am a doer. Mm-hmm. I like to do. I don't always think before I do. I don't always think before I speak. So sometimes I do say the wrong thing. Right. I'm only human. I am not perfect. I never claim that I am perfect. To be honest, I think everybody has a different opinion of how things should be run or how things should go. And I'm very open to listening to people's opinions. You have an idea that you think will work well with the youth? Come at me. Call me, message me, text me, email me. Say, you know what, Victoria, I had this idea and I think it will work. If you have a problem with the way I do it, text me, email me. I'm open. Like, I can only learn from my mistakes. I only learn by trying, right? If I don't try, I'll never know if it's successful or if it's not successful. And I also look at it as you don't get anywhere in life without taking a few risks, without making a few mistakes, because that's really the only way you're going to learn. I look at it as I am 32 years old and I am now finding the one thing in my life that I have such passion for. When I was in high school, they said, what do you want to do with your life? I went to school for baking and pastry arts management. Okay? Like, I went to school to make cakes and cupcakes and cookies. And then...
I'm thinking of a cookie right now.
Okay? And then I went from there to, I was a bartender. I was a lifeguard. My resume, if all together, is 5 pages long on the jobs that I've had. Before I got pregnant with Jackson, I worked for a company called Herbal Magic. My dad joked that I went to school to make people fat, and now I make people thin. So, like, I have been all over the place. Taking those risks and making those mistakes have allowed me to get to where I am, have allowed me to find an incredible husband, to have an incredible family, to have an incredible support system, and to have a career that, yes, I may not have had education for and training in, but I have such deep down, on fire passion for that I don't think I could do anything else.
Right.
When I met with a lady who is the runner of a organization or church called the Dale in Parkdale. And I asked her, she has a very hectic life and a very difficult story. And I said to her, how do you do it? How do you balance it? And she said, I couldn't do my job if I didn't find joy in it. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing is, I couldn't do this job in the hecticness of my life. I couldn't do this job if it didn't bring me joy, if it didn't bring me fulfillment, if I didn't leave at the end of the day feeling more energy and more enthusiasm and more on fire for God than when I started the day. People tell me on Sunday morning when I walk up to do the announcements, how do you have so much energy? How are you so awake? And I jokingly say, oh, it was the extra large coffee I had. Like, truly, it's not. It's the fact that I find joy and fulfillment in this position. Mm-hmm. And so I couldn't do, and I think that's the same for everybody, is you can't do something to its fullest potential if you don't find joy and fulfillment in it. And I can say that through all my mistakes and all my risks, it has gotten me to a place of joy and fulfillment. Mm-hmm. In September 2020, I will be the longest running youth leader since the youth pastor that was mine over 20 years ago. Ron Hurlbert was here for over 20 years as our youth pastor. Since then, no one has exceeded over 2 years. September 2020 will be my 3rd year.
Well, why is that?
Youth pastors...
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. But youth pastors tend to burn out very quickly. And what I have learned from speaking to other youth pastors is they take on everything. Youth pastors tend to be very high in the mercy spiritual gift category. And they take on a lot and they burn out quickly. Something that I have learned, and I think that's the thing, is they try to take on everything and they forget about putting on their own oxygen mask. Mm-hmm. So really learning from other people and talking to other youth pastors and saying, you know, sometimes I need to take that time to recharge. Last weekend, me and 3 of my fellow twin moms went to Niagara Falls. We went shopping. We went to the spa. We had a sit-down dinner that did not include dessert, which most kids' meals include dessert. I actually got to go shopping and try on clothes instead of pulling it off the rack and hoping it fit because I had 3 screaming children in the cart. Right. So having that time and to say, you know what, I need me time is just a way to recharge. You know, I look at it as these power cars, the ones that you have to plug in. It will only go a certain distance until it dies. You have to recharge it. Without recharging, it's not going to go any further. And I think that's the key thing, is taking that time to say, I need to step back. I need to recharge, so that you avoid that, taking that step to burnout. I also think that, you know, God does call people to move to different places. In my situation, I feel God, when I applied for that position back in 2018, when it was just a part-time interim position, I wasn't applying to be a youth pastor. I wasn't applying to other churches. I applied for this church, for this position, for these kids. And I still, to this day, no matter where I go, I'm not looking at a different church. I'm not looking at running a different youth group. I'm not looking to be a part of a different church family. I am here to be a part of this church family, to be a youth spiritual leader for these kids. Because I truly feel that that is where God has called me to be. That God has a plan for everybody, and God has blessed me so much in my life with people here at this church that if I can give back in a small way, it is half of what God has given me in the community that I have at Markham.
Right. So let's say if there are those listening, parents or even teens for that matter, and they decide they want to try it out for their first time to come to the youth group. Yeah. What could they expect on a first visit? Oh,
well, please come. It's so much fun. I said, you know, I'm 32 years old, but I am a kid at heart. I am so on fire to just hang out and have a good time. Right. You know, I feel like God said, let the children come to me, you know? But I think the thing is we have to allow these kids to come to Jesus. And Jesus will give them the opportunity when it is best for them. You know, in this day and age, when we're in such a rush, we're all about fast and moving forward. We forget that we run on God's time. And God isn't always in a rush. So thinking, if I go to youth group, I'm going to go and I'm going to immediately find God. Right. It's possible, but we need to remember that we're on God's time. So coming and just hanging out, you know, we have a great group of kids. I am all about encouragement. There's no bullying. There's no isolation. There are no cliques in my group, because when we do group activities, I pick the groups. I'm not, okay, all right, you're a captain, you guys pick your teams. Nuh-uh. None of this isolation, none of this, I don't like this person. Well, guess what? If I find out that you don't like somebody, I usually pair them together. Because you know what? Life, when you get out into that real world, you don't get to pick your team. You don't always get to pick the people you work with, or you don't always get to be surrounded by your best friends. So you need to learn to work with everybody, learn to encourage people. And so and I'm very welcoming to newcomers. You know, you participate at how you will. If you're somebody who's really shy and you're coming and you know what, you just want to sit back and kind of watch what we're doing, cool. Sit back, hang out, we'll chit chat, get to know each other, you know, just find a way to be comforted in knowing that this is a safe space. Because I am all about the fact that, not everybody is the same. Some people like sports, some people like arts and crafts, some people like devotions, some people just like to sit and read a book.
Right.
And if that's what you need, then that's what you need. And I'm open to doing that and acting that way. If you want to jump in and you're as enthusiastic and energetic as I am, come on out. Yeah. If you're someone who just likes to sit back and watch and just kind of gather information, come. We got chairs. You're welcome to pull up a seat. Because everybody moves at their own pace. And I feel that rushing into something is like, again, you're going to burn out. You pull somebody in who's not ready to be pulled in, and they're going to say, you know what, not really for me. And they're going to walk away. But giving them the space that they need, giving them the opportunity to come and say, how can I make this place my own?
Right.
And that's one thing I really do encourage people to do, is why I take suggestions from the kids. I say, hey, what do you guys want to do? What are activities you enjoy? What are things that you want to see happen? Even our topics that we talk about. I have a DM on Instagram that I say, like, message me your feelings or message me topics that you want to talk about. And we talk about it. I don't shy away from those hard topics. Right now in our society, we seem to be talking a lot about the church and the LGBTQ community. I'm not one who's going to say, oh, well, that's not something we're going to talk about. It's, you know what? I'm going to talk about it. Let's open it up, the conversation. Let's have this conversation. I've spoken to people who dive deeper into the LGBTQ community in my youth pastor circle and say, how have you approached this topic? How do you deal with this? Because it may not be something that I know a lot about, but I'm willing to do the research if that's what these kids need and want. And that's the thing, is I think that's something a youth pastor needs to do, is not be afraid to shy away from those things that these kids are really going into. And I try to meet them on their level. I don't come in and say, like, well, I'm the leader and you're the attendee. It's no, there's a fine line between being their friend and being their youth pastor. But I think you need a perfect balance of both to be able to reach these kids on an emotional, spiritual level where they feel confident enough to be vulnerable with you and to open up and say, here's me, here's where I am. How do we move forward?
Has the topic come up about going, especially Christian and non-Christian schools, about how they can spread the gospel, or how they should not almost act, or their own relationship with non-Christian students?
It's something everybody goes through. I went through it when I was in high school. One of my best friends, it wasn't until grade 11 that she was like, wait, you're a Christian? And that kind of put a shock to me, because I was like, oh, did I not tell you? Do I not portray the Christian aura that, like, do I not act the way a godly woman should act? And so it took me a step back to say, well, what does that look like? Like, what does a woman of God, a child of God look like? We look like everybody. There's not a stamp on my forehead that says child of God or Jesus follower. I might wear a cross around my neck, but that's not saying that it's not who I am. Okay. And so I reach out to these kids and I say, how do we approach the Christian, non-Christian thing? And I said, we have to follow the example that Jesus set for us. The example of the woman at the well. Have you ever heard this? Okay, so the story of the So the story of the woman at the well is the woman she was a Samaritan woman who lived in a town where she was an outcast. She was someone who was not respected, someone who was not in the inner circle. So in that time in the Bible, you'd go to the well to pull out water. But it was so hot, you'd go first thing in the morning or late at night. So this woman was at the well at noon, the hottest time of the day. So she obviously wanted to be alone at the well and not surrounded by people who ostracized her. Jesus comes up, and she obviously realizes that he is a Jewish man, and he realizes that she's a Samaritan woman. In the Bible at that time, they didn't communicate with each other. They weren't supposed to talk, especially a man and a woman, let alone a Jewish man and a Samaritan woman. And Jesus went up to her and just talked to her. In fact, in Bible history, it's the longest recorded conversation Jesus has. So the fact that he took the time out of his schedule, out of his busy life of teaching and performing miracles, to spend time talking to someone he wasn't supposed to. And he was open and honest and just himself. He didn't walk up and say, well, don't you know who I am? I'm Jesus. Get me some water. Like, no, he sat there and he just talked to her. He didn't ostracize her. He didn't judge her. He just sat there and talked to her. And I said this to my kids in youth, is I was just like, you just need to be open. God will open up that opportunity to come along. It's the same way I build trust with the kids for them to open up with me, is that these kids have to build relationships that are open and honest to have the comfort of knowing, you know what, I can take that next step. And find a way to just open up about their faith and be honest about it. Like somebody says, hey, do you want to come to a sleepover at my house Saturday night? You know, I'd love to, but Sunday morning I get up and I go to church on Sunday. Hey, would you be interested in joining me? Why don't we have a sleepover at my house and we'll go Sunday morning? You know, just those small little tidbits of just saying, you know what, this is who I am. And not putting that filter up, not saying, oh, well, I have to be one way with my non-Christian friends and one way with my Christian friends. You know, God created us all in his image, and God created us all perfectly. So we need to honor that gift that God gave us of life and be ourselves. So it is not an easy thing to do. Like, it's a lot easier for me to say it in this podcast than to actually do. And I know a lot of kids, especially in this day and age, struggle with it. But it's something that, again, is God's holding your hand through it. And it's just waiting for those opportunities and seizing those opportunities, not letting that opportunity pass you by. If there's a small little tidbit of, you know, somebody says, I think it was at pizza lunch the other day, I overheard somebody use the OMG in the actual context. So they said, oh my God. And I walked over and I was like, oh, are you guys praying before you eat? And the girl looked at me and she's like, huh? And I said, you know, I understand that this is like, it's a social thing. It's not a church thing that you're here for. But, you know, we try not to use the Lord's name in vain in the church. And she was like, why? And I was like, well, God's name is such a sacred thing. Using it in the context the way you were is disrespectful. And, you know, I understand that sometimes it just comes out, right, but it's something that can be disrespectful to others, especially for those in our community who do follow God and who take God's name so seriously and so it's such a strong and powerful thing. It shouldn't be taken lightly. And she was like, she apologized. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry. You know, I never looked at it that way. It's just a word. And I was like, but it's not. And so that small interaction was just, in my opinion, God's way of saying, this is someone you need to talk to. Here's the opportunity. Don't let it pass you by.
Could you talk about some of the things that have been happening with the youth ministry group?
I have kids who are taking part of our baptism classes here at the church. So again, like, I feel those small little influences, those small things can have huge impact. again, I may not even see the result of that impact because the impact happens down the road. But being that small little tidbit is so impactful. Yes. Seeing these kids grow up and taking those steps to say, you know what, I want more. I want to learn more. I want to give back. I want to take all the blessings that I've been given and share a small amount of them with people that are so unfortunate. It puts a smile on my face. It's going to sound selfish of me, but I give myself a little pat on the back, being like, way to go, Victoria. You got one, right? But it's not just me. There's so many other people in these kids' lives who have such impact that if I'm a small part of that, I'm just doing my part to grow God's kingdom. Baby Zoe her mom is one of my twin mom friends. So she has 4-year-old twin boys. They're identical. And 14 months ago, Zoe was born, no problem. And Zoe was actually in December. So after she was born in October, so a few months after, she was diagnosed with CDG type M. So CDG is a congenital disorder of glycosylation. So the strain that Zoe has, type 2M, is a very, very rare genetic disorder. Zoe is about 1 in 50 across the world who suffer from this type of CDG. So it affects her ability to thrive, so her growth, her eyesight, her brain development. It also causes her to have seizures at night. So there's a lot of things that it will not shorten her lifespan. It just affects the quality of her life. So it's something that obviously as a parent you weren't expecting. It's something that is obviously very heartbreaking, especially for those in her community. Because, for me, I look at it and say, what if that was me? And that kind of thing. And it's hard not to look at it that way. I am part of her village. And so as part of her village, we've tried to find ways that we can help not only Zoe and her family, but the CDG community. There are so many other strains of this disorder that affects so many children. And so on February 29th, so this past Saturday, was Rare Disease Awareness Day. So those in Zoe's community all wore their blue t-shirts. Her mom had this idea of creating these t-shirts to sell to raise money for Zoe's medicines and medical needs that she has. And so the t-shirt says there's no the only disability in life is a bad attitude. And it's more just as a way that we are able to say we support you. In fact, our church youth group, so last year for our 30-hour famine, we raised money for Venezuela. And this year we're raising money for Zoe and sick kids. Awesome. Yeah, so our donations that everybody gives us so that we spend 30 hours not eating, some of that money will go directly to Zoe and her family, and some will go to sick kids in specifically designated for CDG Research. Mm-hmm. It's really exciting because March 22nd is our next youth-led service. And so our topic is I'm talking about spiritual gifts. So that's kind of why I was pulling it out, because I was just writing part of my sermon today talking about it. So I'm really talking about how we use our spiritual gifts and how we discern what they are and how we can use them and how how even we can lose our spiritual gifts if we don't feed them, if we don't use it. You think about something like you go to the grocery store and you buy a thing of tomatoes and you put them in the fridge. You don't use them; they're going to go bad. The same goes for your spiritual gift. One thing is, like, I'm on nominating. I'm also a part of CE&O, so I know our church is really struggling for volunteers. So I'm really trying to find a nonchalant way to say, hey, everybody, we need to be volunteering in the church, because without volunteering, programs are going to disappear.
Yeah.
And so the topic of my sermon is when life gives you lemons, right? So, like, when life gives you lemons, you obviously assume you get lemons, you make lemonade. But God says, hey, let's take those lemons and turn them into limes. Like, he can use those lemons to make change. And I think that's the thing, is like, a lot of people don't think of their spiritual gifts as assets. Some people don't even know their spiritual gifts. It took me a really long time to discern what my spiritual gift was. I was part of the CBWOQ, so Canadian Baptist Women of Ontario and Quebec UPTIC group, which was a cohort of women just kind of learning to be disciples of the Word of God and disciples in the kingdom in our ministry. And diving deeper in, we did our spiritual gifts test, and that's when I found out that one of my spiritual gifts is pastoring. And I was like, no. I don't, again, I went to school for baking and pastry arts management. I did not go to school for theology. What I know of the Bible is what I have read or what I have learned in Sunday school or listened to Craig, or Bill Norman or Tom Cullen. Like, those were my main pastors throughout the years, or Ron Hurlbert, and just listening to these guys talk, and like, that's what I've learned. And so I'm just kind of taking that knowledge and kind of sharing it with everybody else. So when I heard pastor, I was like, no. But then when I dove deeper into exactly what the spiritual gift around pastoring is mercy. The gift of mercy is more the emotional, physical, life care of others, whereas pastoring is mainly focused on the spiritual life, the spiritual health of others. So it turns out that a lot of people who have the spiritual gift of pastoring have the spiritual gift of mercy, not the other way around. Pastors tend to want to care for the whole person. So it was like, oh, okay. And that's one thing, is like, I'm finding that I'm leaning towards the focus of the spiritual life of the kids that are in the youth group, because, I'm looking at, and I think it really hit me when I became a mom, is that, like, you want what's best for your kid. You want everything that life has to offer for your children. And in our faith, what life has to offer is life after death. And in a world where there is so many options. I was filling out Jackson's kindergarten application, and the gender boxes I had to fill out, there was like 6 of them. And I was like, there's so many options out there. And even for religion, there's so many options out there, that being able to provide my children, not just my biological children, but my youth children as well, the knowledge and the opportunity to get to know God on a spiritual, deep level, and to know that the words that I've said or the things that I have done for them could impact their life, in the fact that they could live an eternal life in heaven with God, is like incredible. Like my grandfather, he accepted Christ into his life when he was 80. So like he went to church with my grandma, didn't really Didn't really do it for him, but he went because she wanted to go. And then it took him until he was 80 to really say, I want God in my life. I want him to be my spiritual leader. And I physically saw that change in him. And there's other people before I accepted Christ into my life. I physically saw the transformation between who they were before they accepted Christ and who they were after. So really seeing that transformation of who that person is.
Were you born into a Christian family?
I was. So I have a very unconventional background. You wouldn't know it from looking at me, but my father is first-generation Canadian. My father's parents were from St. Vincent in the Caribbean. So I am half West Indian and half Canadian. So my mom's family is actually from Newfoundland. So like Canadian. So both families attended church on a regular basis. That's what we did. Even when I was a kid growing up, my parents also encouraged us to dress up for church. So I was not allowed to wear jeans. I wore a skirt, dress pants, or a dress. Because according to my parents, it's Sunday morning. We need to look our best for God. I have now come to find that we should look our best all the time, and God takes us however state we're in. So if I'm wearing jeans, God still loves me. So Sunday morning, it was, you get up for church, you go to church, you went to Sunday school, and then you went for Swiss Chalet, which was Christian chicken. That's what we did on Sundays. Sunday was also the day that we spent with family. So it wasn't like you went home and you went out with friends. Sunday was family day. So growing up in my church family, it was easy for me to say, well, this is my faith. This is me. This is what I believe. This is what I need to follow. So when I was in high school, I actually started doing research into other religions. I did some research into other religions. I went to temple with a Jewish friend I had, and I went through the process of Passover with her. A friend of mine went to Catholic church. And so I went to church. I went to Catholic service with her. I went to mass with her. Another one of my friends was Islam, so I went to a service with her, and I found a Wiccan church in Scarborough that I attended one Sunday. That was the weirdest of them all, but it was really interesting to me to really dive into learning about the different religions and understanding what it is that I chose to believe, that it wasn't just something that I was told to believe, it was I am choosing. And it really came to fruition when my parents chose to leave Markham. So at that point I was driving so I could travel where I wanted to go, and my parents said, we understand if you want to stay at Markham or you want to come to the church we went to. I chose to stay at Markham. I chose to worship at Markham. And in fact, now at that stage, my parents also gave my siblings the opportunity to choose whether or not they wanted to continue in church. My brother and sister do not attend church on a regular basis. They are what you call EC Christians, so Easter and Christmas. My parents, now that they have moved up to Halliburton, don't necessarily attend a church on a regular basis, more because they don't feel like they are connected to a church at all. So I feel truly blessed in that sense that I made the decision of what I wanted for my life and what religion I wanted to follow, and how blessed I am to be part of a family like Markham Baptist.
In your time as a youth ministry leader, have you ever been morally challenged?
Yes. Have I been morally challenged? Yes. I was actually just speaking to somebody about this the other day, is being that I was friends with some of these kids prior to being their youth ministry leader. I had them on social media prior to being their youth leader. And as their youth leader, I use social media as a way to communicate with some of these kids. It is hard sometimes for me to see what some of these kids post on their social media. Some things that they say or things that they do. Because if it was something they said or did during our youth time together, during our event, it would be one thing. I would have a responsibility as their youth leader to say, that's not right, or that's not appropriate, or that's not behavior we do here. When I'm seeing it as I'm sitting on my couch at 10 o'clock at night, it's hard for me to turn around and say, it's not my place. It's not my place to be their parent. It's not my place to police what they post on social media. So I very much struggle with that morally and spiritually, because I want to know how to help them without also breaking their trust in the fact that they have me on social media. Because a lot of kids use social media as an outlet, and I don't ever want them to feel like, oh, well, I can't have Victoria because she might go and tell my mom. And I would never do that, because again, I built this trust between them. So I find ways to bring up those during our discussions. So things that have come up are sex before marriage, drugs, same-sex relationships. Those things have come up that I turn around and say, okay, well, I'm going to use the platform that I have as their youth pastor to talk to them in a generic sense, so that they do feel comfortable enough to say, okay, well, she's not going to shy away from it. Maybe it is something I can talk to her about. Maybe it is something that I'm willing to open up to her about. I also struggle sometimes with saying the wrong thing. I am in no way perfect. I have made my share of mistakes, especially younger. When I was in high school, I made silly mistakes. And I sometimes struggle with, how do I open up to these kids about real things they're going through without making it seem like I'm condoning the behavior. Like, I don't want them to go home and be like, oh, I can start smoking weed because Victoria said she tried it.
Right.
Or that kind of thing. So I struggle sometimes with, how do I open up that vulnerable conversation without airing my dirty laundry, basically. So I feel like I do my best to encourage these kids in the best way that I know how. And again, sometimes it may not be the perfect way about going about doing it. Right. It may not be the way Pastor Craig would do it or the head of the deacons would do it. But so far, I've built connections with these kids that I feel truly good about.
Right.
That we have that relationship so far, that they are willing and open to talk to me.
Right.
And so if that's built on the way that I've done it, then I'm going to continue to do it the way that I've done it and do my best to be confident in my relationship with God. And when I do have those moral dilemmas or those spiritual struggles, really holding on tight to what I feel God is calling me to do.
Right.
I feel like one of the things that I look at is an orchid. No, thank you. An orchid is a beautiful, amazing flower, but orchids grow in the worst condition. And so some people will go through times where they are in that worst condition, but something beautiful can grow from that. And I feel sometimes that, yes, I may have gone through times in my life where I am at that point of being in that worst condition. But if God can use that worst condition to relate to the kids on that kind of basis, a orchid can grow.
Right.
A good thing, a beautiful thing can grow from that situation.
I guess the way I see it is there are almost 4 phases, at least in this church, that I see, which is the children, the youth, the young adult, and then the adult. And I think within the conversation, I was thinking about which one is very much foundational and which one of those foundations are tested with turbulence. And then I was thinking about the middle 2, which is the youth and the young adult. And then just now when you were mentioning about the orchid and talking about these hot button topics, I remember thinking back into my own times when my brief time with a youth pastor, they used to preach us about all these different things, and I used to call hypocrisy on them when I saw them go against what they were preaching. Right. And so there was that I guess why I stopped going to youth like the youth groups was the sense of rebellion is I don't need that. Let me just go to the adult ministry.
I do find that it's very important, especially in this day and age where everything seems to be upfront. It's very hard to hide in our social media world.
Right.
Everything is online, everything's posted, everything's open.
You almost have to be hyper aware.
And the thing is, I was going through my list of Facebook friends, and I noticed that I have a lot of people from my church family on my Facebook. And when I accepted this position as a youth leader, some people said, oh, well, you can't have your youth on your social media. And I said, well, why? It's how I connect with these kids. And I said, I don't post anything I'm ashamed of. I am who I am. I'm not perfect, and I don't claim to be perfect. And I think that's another way to build that trust, is not claiming to be something I'm not. I make mistakes. I don't always make the right decision. I don't always follow what I'm supposed to do. I disobeyed my parents. I sin. Everybody sins. Everybody falls short. And I think the thing is being able to accept that and not, like you said, preach one thing and walk another, is something that I really take pride, or not take pride, but take a stance in, that I am going to be who I am, accept me for who I am, and we can move forward. And I think that's something else that I would say if somebody had a problem with the way that I run the youth group is, you hired me for a reason. I'm doing what it is I do. This is who I am. I'm not going to hide who I am and pastor to these kids that this way and then hide and be ashamed of who I am, because that's me being hypocritical of me telling these kids, you need to be who you are, love who you are. You are a child of God. You are precious to God, and he made you perfect. So you need to be who God made you to be, and then hide myself on the same front. They're not going to trust me. They're not going to believe what I have to say, because I'm not walking what I've taught. And I think that's an important thing, again, in building that trust, is just encouraging those in a youth-led, in any position in power, senior pastor, head of a committee, even at school or whatever, is being able to represent and be you and go from there. So don't say one thing and do another. Say what you say and do what you do, and allow them to be in sync with each other. Right. And I've said this to the kids, I do my best to be as open and honest with them as I can. Again, it may not be the way other people would approach it, but so far it's working. So, and I don't want to change who I am. I feel like God made me this way, and I've accepted that God's made me this way, and that I'm going to continue to be me and continue to follow in the path that I feel God has put in front of me. Have I always done that? Definitely not. Have I always strayed left when God's told me to go right? Definitely. But I feel like, here's the best way I can explain it, and I'm going to go back to the superheroes. Spoiler alert for anyone who has not seen the last two Avenger movies. So, in the second last Avenger movie, which is Infinity War, towards the end of the episode, Doctor Strange is sitting in a meditation position, and his head is shaking all around like crazy. And Iron Man walks up to him and says, what's going on, type thing. And he says, there's a huge number, 17,000 number of scenarios on how their situation with Thanos will end up. And Iron Man looks at him and says, how many of those do we win? And Doctor Strange says 1. And then flash forward to Endgame, and Iron Man is in the midst of fighting with Thanos, and Doctor Strange is fighting with somebody else, and they look at each other, and Doctor Strange puts up a finger and just says, doesn't say anything, just puts up one finger, indicating to Iron Man that this is the one scenario where they win. I think that is a great analogy into our life with God. Is that there are so many infinite ways, that paths we can take for our life. But God knows that one that eventually we will end up on. It's not saying we won't take 6,000 other paths, but eventually we will get to one. And I feel as if there has been times in my life where I have taken that wrong path. Instead of listening to what God had for me and saying, no, I want to go this way. Or, your GPS tells you turn right at the light and you turn left, and it's recalculating. So there's definitely been times in my life that I have been recalculating. And I know for many people, I'm sure they may be in a season right now where their life is recalculating. But I would never shy away from sharing those experiences, because those experiences have made me who I am. Those experiences have gotten me to this point. Those experiences have gotten me to a fulfilled, joyful life with my husband, my 3 children, my church family, my Heavenly Father, and my, safe to say, career path that I am on. And without those wrong turns, without those recalculating moments, I may not have gotten to this point. But shying away from those and being ashamed of those would mean I am ashamed of who I am. And I feel God calls us to be proud. Well, not necessarily proud, but be thankful for who we are, because we are children of God. We are His creation, and His creation is perfect.
What, if anything, do people get wrong about youth ministry leaders or misunderstand?
I would say, in my experience, you know what? I would say from my experience that from other youth ministry leaders that I've talked to, that we are the garbage can. That's the analogy I'm going to use, that we're the garbage can, that you can just throw anything into us and we'll just do it. I don't want to do this, but give it to the youth pastor. I don't want to do that. I'll give it to the youth pastor. And I think that's another way that youth pastors burn out, is because they feel like, oh, this is the opportunity I've been given. I need to do this. I need to do that. No one else is going to do it, so I need to step up and do that. And I feel, for me, especially not having that education behind my experience, that I feel sometimes that people might underestimate my spiritual nurturing because I don't have, and maybe that's just me in my head, that you need that education behind it to be successful in this position. And I'm going to say, I don't believe that that's true. I have a lot of experience in working with children and youth in ministry through Kids Camp, which was our summer program, through working at Kwasand, through nursery and Praise Place and Sunday school and youth group, that sometimes experience does trump education. And in my case, it does. But I think that that's one thing that I think as a church we need to, or as a church community, not specifically Markham, but churches in a whole need to remember that it's important for every person on their staff to receive spiritual growth and spiritual development. And sometimes we, in a senior position or a leadership position, we forget about our own spiritual growth. We're so focused on our church family's spiritual growth and our church congregants' spiritual growth that we forget about ourselves. Again, we forget to put on our own oxygen mask. And I think that's another way we burn out, is we're so consumed by other people's spiritual growth that we forget about our own. So for those out there who do have youth leaders, encourage them to seek a spiritual advisor or a person that they can just basically work on their spiritual growth. Find their youth leader, find their place that they connect, so that they can feel spiritually fed alongside their youth, because the deeper they're spiritually fed, the deeper they'll be able to spiritually feed other people. People tell me all the time, I don't know how you do it, Victoria. How do you handle church and work and 3 kids and your husband with his own business and all that? And usually I'm like, I don't know. And so I said this to Craig this morning, as I was like, I feel like that's going to be one of the questions. They're going to ask me how I do it. And I'm going to respond with, I don't know. And like the listeners are going to listen and be like, well, what does she have to say? She doesn't know how she does it. She just does it. And I'm like, but it really made me sit down and think. I was actually driving home this afternoon from work, and I was literally thinking about, how do I, as a human, deal with this, my life? And I was like, I feel like I would be a drug addict and an alcoholic if I didn't have God and my village, because I'd just be so stressed out that I'd be going home being like, I need a beer or a glass of wine. But I'm just like, I literally am so thankful for the position that I'm in, because like I was afraid of going back to work when I had the twins, because I was like, how are we going to afford daycare? B, how am I going to deal with going back to a 44-hour work week and still have time for my family? Where I was told I had to work weekends. So now not only am I working during the week, but when my children are actually at home, I'm supposed to be working. And like, how do I deal with the craziness of having 5 people in a 2-bedroom condo? Like, how do we do this? And to be honest, again, I feel like God just put opportunities into my path to say like, here, Victoria, here's this opportunity that this is the struggle I've given you, but here's how you endure it. Here's the struggle I've given you. Here's how you endure it. And it was like, and that's what I was thinking about. So if you asked me that question, I was going to respond with, I do it one step at a time. And I also wrote down the steps. I focus on the big picture. I'm positive. I plan. I use my time management. I make goals for the day, and I accept help, and I recharge. I wrote it down so I didn't forget.
We should take a picture of that and add it in the show notes.
I had to make sure I wrote it. I also had to write down the 1 Corinthians so I didn't forget it. But no, I had to write it down because I was like, these are definitely the steps that I take to make sure like how I get through my day. Because without it, I don't know.
Do you think having 3 kids made you a better youth pastor?
Yes and no. I say no because I've always loved kids. Always. Even before I had kids, I was volunteering at kids camp as a youth leader. I feel like children are our future, and if I want a life that is incredible, we need to be nourishing those younger than us to build a better life, because they are going to be the ones that we leave this world to. So we need to constantly be feeding those below us. Yes, in the fact that I don't think I would be here today in this position had I not had 3 children so close together. Because again, like I said, youth pastor was never in my eye line. And like, I'm so excited because CBOQ is putting on a youth leader certificate program.
Could you tell us some of the books? I know you mentioned podcasts. Could you mention what are you reading? What are you listening to?
So I just finished a really good book that I'm really hoping I can dive into a book study with our youth coming up in April. And the book's called If, and it's by Mark Batterson. And it's basically talks about trading your if-only regrets for God's what-if possibilities. So instead of looking, so the book kind of starts off talking about the Eiffel Tower. And without one piece of the Eiffel Tower, it may not be there. And without this part, it wouldn't be there. And so those little building blocks. And we talk about if only regrets, if only I did this, if only I did that. But instead of looking at it that way, saying, what if? So instead of saying, if only I didn't cross the street, I may not have gotten hit by a car. But instead of looking at it, what if I crossed the street? Right? Not saying, oh, what if I cross the street and I get hit by a car would be a good thing. But looking at it from, the opposite perspective. Instead of looking at the if onlys, looking at the what ifs. God grants us with all these possibilities, and they're infinite. There's so many possibilities of things that can go on in your life. I never thought I would have twins. I never thought I'd be a youth pastor. I never thought I'd be here. But God put those possibilities in front of me, and instead of saying, if only, I took that opportunity to say, what if? And so that's kind of what I learned from the book, is just accepting those possibilities and not living your life wondering what if, not if only. You're thinking, you're constantly looking forward and saying, what if?
I want you to try and reach out to a youth, somebody in their youth or somebody in their younger years who might find trouble actually just reaching out and wanting to join a group, because there are those type of people that even have the struggle even trying to be a part of a social group. You can give advice, go through a past story, and you're speaking directly to them.
I wasn't always confident in who I was. When I was in high school, I didn't always feel as if I was accepted for who I am. So I became this loud, outspoken person as a way to feel like I would fit in. So I surrounded myself with other loud, outspoken people because that's where I felt I fit in. But then as I grew up, I found people who I connected with who were the complete opposite. So we're more of like a type A personality. But even then, I felt like I had to silence my out-of-the-box, outgoing energy when I was around them because the two didn't mesh. So I found myself having a split personality. I had my type A, which was very in the box, quiet, reserved, stick to the plan. And then my type B, who was off the wall, outgoing, completely out of the box, I couldn't even see it type person. And I sat there thinking to myself, where do I fit in? Am I type A or am I type B? Which one is me? And I found it so much easier to say, I am because you are. So I am me. And that's the clearest sentence I can be. The clearest sentence that I can say to somebody is just constantly repeat, I am. I am me. That it is not your responsibility or my responsibility to have people like me. Just be me. And you'll find, it may take a while, but you will find the right place for you. The one thing is, I know sometimes it's hard to take that risk, but taking risk receives great reward. You'll learn who you are as a person. You'll learn who you are as a friend. You learn who you are as a student. You'll learn who you are as a basketball player, but you need to take that step, even if it's just a small step. I'm one of those people who I have no problem diving in feet first. I don't need to test the water. Don't care if it's hot or cold. I'm just jumping in. I'll figure it out when I get in there. Other people need to take the stairs. As long as you're taking it step by step, you're still working your way into the pool. And that's what I would encourage to anybody who's interested or eager to find a way to become part of any group. Is it doesn't matter if you are a jump in feet first or take the stairs. Any way you do it, that's the way you feel most comfortable. But again, you have to take one step. You have to do either. You can't just sit on the edge of the pool and say you're swimming. So I encourage anybody to, if you are out there and you say, you know what, I don't know how to connect to people in my youth group, or I don't know how to connect to people in my church family, or I don't know how to connect to people at my school, or I don't know how to connect to my family. There are ways, and it may not be easy. It may not be the most comfortable, but taking that one step will allow you to move one step closer to finding out how or where you belong. And, I feel as if, Jesus tells us to follow his example. And even Jesus didn't like to be alone. When he went to the garden to pray, he still brought his 12 disciples. They stood outside the garden, but they were still there. Jesus went to the top of the mountain, but his disciples were still there. Maybe not physically around him in the proximity that he could see them, but he traveled with people. He talked to people. He interacted with people. And so I truly feel like we are not put on this earth to be alone. So finding someone, anyone, it doesn't matter if they seem like, I connect with these kids who are 11 to 18 years old. Some of them, I'm twice their age. But finding that common ground, that place to connect, is a way that we can all grow together. I learned from them. I learned what TikTok was. And how I learned how to style my hair differently. I learned how to match different clothing for my body type. And I feel as if you ask these kids, that I hope that they've learned things from me. And that's the thing, is just, I would encourage anybody to just take that step.
On that note, would you mind closing us in prayer?
Of course. Before I close, I just want to encourage those in Markham, for those who have subscribed and are listening, and you have anyone in our youth range, so 11 to 18, who are interested in taking that step and joining us at youth group, you're welcome to email me. So my email is loft.mbc@gmail.com. And I'd love to be able to encourage you guys to come out to youth group. Or if you're not in this area, I'd love to help you find a youth group. I have a lot of people that I've been able to connect with over the last few years in different areas of Ontario and Quebec. And so I'd love to be able to help you find a youth group or a church that's great for you. So if I can help you, I'd love to be that resource. All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessing that you have given to us in Jesus Christ. Lord, you sent him to earth to be our superhero, to save us from our sin, so that we can spend an everlasting, enjoyable, ultimate life with you in heaven. Lord, you tell us to follow Jesus' example as we open up to those around us, as we open up to ourselves. Lord, may we remember who we are in ourselves and who we are in you. Lord, I pray for the moms out there. May they feel comforted in knowing that they are not alone, that they are not just struggling on their own, but you are there holding their hand and carrying them through any struggle. That as if they, instead of stepping back and saying, I need to pull away, that they just grab onto you and hold on tighter, Lord, as you are the one who will help us through anything, as you do not give us anything we can't handle. And if we have something that we feel our yoke we cannot bear, that you are willing to take it upon your shoulders and carry it with us, Lord. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity to be able to speak to those out there listening, that may I have said or done something that you will use as a tool to impact their lives, Lord. Lord, I truly am thankful for the blessing that you have given me to have this opportunity to do your will, to provide awareness and acknowledgement of your kingdom, Lord, and how we are all truly blessed to have you as our Father, as our Son, and as our Holy Spirit. Lord, I thank you. I praise you in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, and thank you to all the listeners and subscribers for tuning in to another episode. We are very grateful for all your feedback that you've been giving throughout all the social media or where this podcast has been uploaded to. If you're a new listener, any platform that you're on, whether it be Google, Spotify, or iTunes, you can subscribe, and that actually helps us a lot. And we are very grateful again for the great comments. And if you want a prayer request, if you just want to ask a question or just want to get in contact with us, you can visit the show notes where there is a dedicated email where you can send in any questions, prayer request, or even just have a question for the next round of podcasts. And if you would like to support the podcast, there is a designated Patreon page where you can visit the show notes, and there's a link. You can go to that link, and there is a set donation that will help support the production quality for the podcast in future episodes. We're very, again, I would like, on behalf of the entire crew that's on the podcast, to tell you how grateful we are in recording this. This wouldn't be possible without you, and we're always looking forward to the next bringing the next speaker, who is the next great speaker that you'd be interested in listening to. And we always want to bring somebody that's interesting, and any feedback, it really just helps us grow even more. And if you're interested in any of the books that the guest speaker was talking about in the previous episodes, they're all listed in the show notes with Amazon links, so you can go over there, look at the book, purchase it if you want. Many of them also have digital ebooks, so that's another great way of reading these books. And again, we encourage a lot of you to just stay in touch if you can, and we would love to hear back from you. Thank you.
We would like to thank Victoria for joining us this evening, and we would like to thank you for listening. Please join us next week for another interesting, insightful conversation.